I've spent 74 years shaping wood with my hands. You'd think a man could leave something behind, something solid, lasting, without having to bargain for it. But life has a way of testing patience, even for those who've built their world one careful cut at a time. My name is Edward Langford. This workshop, it's more than four walls and dusty floors. Every inch smells of sawdust, oil, and memory. Every splinter carries a story. You see, people often mistake a workshop for a storage space, a relic of a man's past. They don't realize it's a place where life itself is carved. I built this place with my own two hands decades ago. It wasn't just a job, it was a promise. To my family, to myself, to the craft. I taught my boy, Kevin, here. Taught him that a proper joint isn't just about wood. It's about care, patience, and respect. I remember him as a boy, standing on a stool, trying to hammer a nail straight. "Measure twice, Dad?" he'd ask. "Yes, son," I'd say, smiling under my breath, because fixing a mistake costs more than getting it right the first time. The years rolled on. Kevin grew tall, his hands stronger, but the world changed faster than any of us could keep up with. People started valuing speed over craft, money over legacy. And one day, my own son, the boy I taught to love patience, told me this old workshop wasn't worth keeping anymore. "Dad, it's just space," he said. "We could sell it, get quick cash, move on." I laughed at first, not out of mockery, but because I couldn't imagine life without this place. Space? Kevin, this isn't just space. It's every lesson I've ever learned, every failure, every triumph. It's home. He didn't understand, and maybe he never would. I didn't know then that patience would be tested in a way even I couldn't have anticipated. That one day my own son would sell this workshop behind my back, and that the very thing he ignored, the blueprints, the designs, the work of decades, would become the only thing that could save him. But that day has not come yet. And until it does, I sit here, surrounded by wood and silence, listening to the rain, thinking about how life has a funny way of teaching lessons, slow, deliberate, like carving a joint the right way. And so I wait. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. Kevin would stop by every other day, always polite, always smiling, but there was an edge in his voice, a sharpness that didn't belong to the boy I once taught to measure twice and cut once. "Dad," he began one afternoon, leaning against the workbench with his hands stuffed in his pockets. I could hear the impatience in his words, but I also knew he wouldn't force the issue. Not yet. He was a clever boy. He'd learned diplomacy, a skill I never cared for, and now he wielded it against me like a scalpel. "It's not just about money, Kevin," I said, my voice calm, deliberate. "This place, these walls, they're the sum of a lifetime. You can't just put a price on that." He frowned, scratching the back of his neck. "I know, Dad, I get it, but the bills, the mortgage, the debts. You know I didn't plan for this, and the house alone isn't enough." I set the sanding block down and studied him. He wasn't the boy who once traced his fingers over the edge of my carefully carved letters. He was grown now, worried about numbers, about appearances, about climbing faster than the rest of the world. I've given you every tool you need, Kevin. Not just wood and nails, but patience, precision, the knowledge that some things take time. That includes money. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, almost pleading. Dad, please, just consider it. Sell the workshop. We could move on, live better. It's not like this place matters anymore. You're getting older. It's heavy for you. I swallowed, feeling the familiar weight of aging settle on my shoulders. There was truth in his words. Yes, I was older. My hands didn't grip tools the way they used to. My back ached from decades of bending over workbenches. But to sell the workshop? To abandon the place where my life's work lived? That was unthinkable. No, Kevin, I said. My voice, calm as it was, carried a finality he hadn't heard before. I will not sell it. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. He straightened, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight. Dad, you don't get it. You think you can hold on to this forever, but life doesn't wait. The world doesn't care about sawdust and old blueprints. You're living in the past. I shook my head, looking around the workshop, the shelves of plans, the stacks of lumber, the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Kevin, the past is what builds the future. Without it, all you have is nothing. It wasn't long after that, maybe a week, that I had a fall. Slipped on sawdust near the back of the shop. Nothing broken, thankfully, but it left me shaken. Kevin, ever the quick observer, used it as leverage. Dad, I know you don't want to sell, but maybe it's time to think about it. For your health. I knew what he was really saying. I'm tired of waiting. I need control, now. I let him think he was persuading me. I nodded, laid my hand over his on the workbench. Kevin, I'll think about it. Inside, though, I knew I had to protect one thing above all else, the binder, the leather folder marked Design Number 47. It held the blueprints, the sketches, the inventions that had never been recognized. That binder was the one thing that couldn't be sold or forgotten. A month later, I learned it had been done. Kevin, with quiet determination, had signed the paperwork while I rested, citing my health as unable to manage affairs. The workshop was sold to a developer, and the check, the sum he had promised would solve everything, was gone from our bank account before I even realized what had happened. I walked through the empty lot the next day. The wind whistled through the skeleton of my life's work. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the knowledge that someone had reduced decades of labor to a single transaction. Yet, in the chaos, one thing remained. Design Number 47. Safe, secret, and ready. I looked at the soil, the scattered bricks, the ghosts of machines that once hummed here, and I whispered to myself, time has a way of balancing the scales. It always does. Weeks passed. I stayed mostly in my small apartment, letting the world believe I had retired fully, that the workshop was gone, that my legacy was sold off for a quick cash sum. Kevin called occasionally, first polite, then frantic. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer a father can give.
Then came the phone call I had quietly been expecting. A voice, unfamiliar yet formal, spoke with the kind of measured tone lawyers use when they think they're speaking to someone they can manipulate. "Mr. Langford?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm, steady, like a man who knows he's holding the key. "We're calling from Henderson and Co. Developers. We've recently begun construction on the former Langford workshop property. During demolition, we discovered a set of blueprints, dated 1983, signed by you. The designs appear to involve a load-bearing system that is revolutionary. Are these your work?" I let the silence hang for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then, "Yes, that would be mine." The voice on the other.
Kevin arrived at the site, his face pale, hands fidgeting. I watched him from a distance, letting the silence speak before I greeted him. There's a lesson in watching. It teaches more than words ever can. "Dad," he started, voice almost cracking. I don't know what to do. They won't work with me. They said they need you. Please, you have to sign." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked slowly through the half-built workshop, touching the beams, feeling the echo of decades of care in my fingertips. Every notch, every line of my old designs, every blueprint page I had saved, it all whispered back to me, reminding me of patience, of legacy, of a life built carefully. Finally, I turned to him, my eyes steady. "Kevin, some things cannot be rushed, and some mistakes cannot be fixed by money alone. This," I said, gesturing to the developing structure, "was never just about the workshop. It was about respect, about understanding the weight of what you inherit." He looked down, shame mixing with desperation. I saw a man who had grown too fast, wanted too much, and forgotten that life is built slowly, just like a proper joint, a solid wall, or a strong foundation. I agreed to help the developer, of course, but only on my terms. Kevin had to learn the value of his father's work, to participate fully, and to witness firsthand the brilliance he had dismissed. For the first time, he truly saw what it meant to honor someone else's labor. Days passed. Kevin learned patience again, relearning lessons from a father he had once tried to outmaneuver. Every blueprint corrected, every measurement double-checked, every careful stroke of pencil or hammer reminded him that shortcuts come at a cost. And in the quiet moments, when the sun glinted off the beams, dust motes floating lazily in the warm light, I found a strange sense of satisfaction, not in revenge, not in triumph, but in the slow, quiet teaching of a life lesson. A father's work is never just for himself. It is for those who follow, whether they realize it or not. Finally, the developer called me to sign the licensing agreement. I did so calmly, deliberately. Kevin watched, humbled, quiet for once, understanding at last that some things can only be earned. "Patience, Kevin," I said softly, "builds more than walls. It builds respect, trust, and sometimes it builds a man." With the developer's funds and guidance, the old workshop was reborn, not as a private property, not as a commodity,
but as a training center for young carpenters and apprentices. I oversaw the reconstruction, teaching again, this time with Kevin beside me, following my instructions carefully. He swept the floors, organized tools, measured wood, and learned the joy of precision, of care. He learned what I had always tried to teach him, that value is in the work itself, not in the money it can fetch. I watched him, sometimes smiling quietly, sometimes shaking my head at his stubbornness, but mostly I just let him learn. There's no better lesson than lived experience. And in those moments, I realized that this was the true legacy of the workshop. Not the walls, not the beams, not the blueprints, but the lessons, the patience, the knowledge passed on to the next generation. Now, when I sit in the sun on the porch of my modest apartment, I think back on that moment, when my own son believed he could take a shortcut, when he thought he could sell a lifetime of labor for quick cash. I smile quietly, because I know some things cannot be stolen, cannot be sold, cannot be rushed. They exist in the quiet hours, in the measured movements of hands, in the minds of those willing to learn. The workshop still stands, alive with energy, young hands shaping wood under careful guidance. And Kevin? He is a better man for it, not because of money, not because of fear, but because he finally understood what I had always known. True craftsmanship, true legacy, it cannot be sold, it must be lived.